Okay, and we're back. We're back from a break. It's COMP2068, winter 2016 semester, and it's week 8, part 1 of our broadcast. And I was talking to everybody here that are present today. I know there's a bit of a field trip, and that's okay. There's a lab that I put up on Blackboard. Let's take a look at that again. It's called the user model. It's worth 2% of your final mark. It is something that you can do with on your own or in pairs. Right, so you can do it by yourself if you like to. If you don't like to work with anybody else, if you want to do it with somebody else as a partner programming exercise, you can certainly do that. It's good for learnings. I want you to take the GitHub repo, that's called Mongo Demo, COMP2068 Mongo Demo on my Georgian College account here. Right, so if I look at this one, it's one of the first ones here, COMP2068 Mongo Demo, and this is the one that I actually was using from 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago actually. When we were doing Mongo for the first time, just before your exam, we kind of touched upon Mongo. So what I want you to do with this one is take this repo, download it, change the name so it says Lab 5, right? And then what I want you to do is, if you look in here, the structure is already preset for you. It's working. Make sure that it doesn't say COMP2068 Mongo Demo. Change it up so it says Lab 5 and all that kind of stuff. Make all the necessary changes. And if I was to pull this down for a second, let's take a look. So if I was to go into Mongo Demo, and that would be under COMP2068. Here it is, COMP2068. So this was done like February 24th. It's way back. So notice how, let me just get rid of some of this stuff. So I'm killing all these ones for a second. And one of the things I had to change, like I said, one of my errors last week was I had this connection to my live reload. I just killed it in here. That's all I've done. So one thing you have to do inside your project, and that's part of the requirement, is see how I have my Thomas 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Mongo lab? That's for me, right? That only works for Heroku on my site, right? So I don't recommend you use that. Make your own. You have to make, or you already have your own Mongo account, Mongo lab. You can certainly use your own credentials here. Just replace yours with mine, or mine with yours, all right? So that's what you have to do. But locally, what I'd probably ask you to do is test with the remote one, the Mongo lab one, locally. So don't make your local repository first, because if you do something like this locally, and then you try and do this later, it may not add up. It may not work properly. So always test right on Mongo lab if you can. Okay, if you can't, and if you have a problem with it or whatever, this would be fine. You can do that method as well. But what I have right here for now, and just to remind you guys how it looks, if I go up online and if I see what I have an example of this floating around. So it's COMP2068, right? And it's winter 2016. And I think I called it Mongo Demo 2 .azurewebsites.net. And it also functions on Heroku. It functions on both, right? So it's not a big deal to get it going, like I showed you guys last time. I'm going to give you guys about half an hour in class to get started, right? To start going with this one. As you can tell, when it's quiet like this, when we first start off, and the website is like, when I say quiet, I'm talking about when Azure or Heroku first starts off. It takes a bit of to get going, right, for the first time, right? Just FYI. Right, so I'll bring up the Heroku version as well. You can see which one works faster for you. So if I go to COMP2068 winter 2016 Mongo Demo .herokuapp.com, you can see which one works faster. Take a look. So home just came up. This one just came up on Azure, and now it's come up on Heroku as well. So they both look identical, right? So on Azure, it looks like this. If I click the article section, it sees that there's a bunch of articles here, right? And on Heroku, if I click articles, it's identical, right? So there's 2 different sites, access to the same database. If I want to remove something like this, say this testing, I want to remove the testing one, and I'm in Heroku, take a look. So I'm in Heroku, I'm in here, and I go delete. And then when I go back to articles here and refresh, right? It's gone from here too, from both Azure and Heroku, because they're sharing the same Mongo lab, right? So what I want you to do is I want you to go into your into the site. So if I take a look at the site files here for a second, let's take a look. Here's my models. I have a model right now for article, my article model, and it looks like this. What is your user model going to look like if this is the article model, right? Maybe username and password. right? Could be email as well. You might want to add an email, something else that you want your user to have, right? So you're going to have to kind of put the requirements here for the user model. And it's got to look very similar to this. I would program it almost identical. Use this model as a guide, as a template for yourself, right? So you need that, okay? You need a bunch of views. Normally I have a bunch of subviews for add, edit, and index for my articles site, right? You need to do that. You also have to modify the other ones to link to that, to the user model thing, right? So that's one thing I didn't put up on the lab, but you need to do. If you go up on partials under my nav bar, you're going to have to make a link to the user model somehow, the user, I don't know, a dashboard or whatever you want to call it, right? That you're going to make, right? So you have to make a link here in your navbar.ejs. That's something else you have to do, okay? So you have to add an article. So instead of a model that's article, you have to have a user model. You also have to have user roots, right? Because user roots are required too. So if I go to the, I have an article roots, and these are all the article roots, right? So take a look at some of this. You may not do all of this stuff because remember, I'm only asking you to create, read, update, and delete users, right? You may choose the same functionality, just rename, instead of article, make it a user. That's fine. See if it works, if it's that easy. If it's that easy to make a user using this methodology, go ahead, right? I challenge you to see if you can make it go, right? The other pieces are, just another thing to remember is, so that's the routes have to be modified. And you know what, just because I've said that and I didn't put that up on Blackboard, I'm going to modify this to make sure you remember to do that. So I'm going to kind of go in here and say, a user model. So you create a user model instead of doing one of these. So we'll say create a user model. And we also need to create a user root, create user roots, user roots, right? Because that's something you have to do. Create user model, create user roots, create user views that allow the user to perform full CRUD on the users collection. Ensure that you create your own Mongo database, right, for use with this lab. Okay, so I think it's pretty clear. Let me just go back and keep looking at this thing to make sure you know what we're doing. So that's one. The other thing you need to do is, just to point this out, is on your app.ts, there's several changes you have to make. Notice how in app.ts, you have to change the Mongoose Connect line on line 30 here to your own Mongo database on MongoLab, right? That's got to be changed. So that's line 30, right? Notice also how I have roots that are scheduled over here. On line 19 and 21, right, you have roots for your basic roots, and you have roots that I've outlined for your articles. Well, obviously, you're going to have to do something like this. I have kind of penned it in for you, right, where it's roots for users. Just uncomment this one, right? And the same thing goes further down. That's one part. And the other part is down here when it comes to, where you do your app use, you have to uncomment out this one and make sure it points to the right user's thing. Those things have to be enabled. Otherwise, there's no connection between your app.js and your users.js. That has to be there. Okay, so just those things. I'm just telling you what to do, so there's no issues. Okay. Any questions around Lab 5? Again, this is due tomorrow night at midnight. It can be done with somebody else or alone. Please indicate in your submission criteria that you have. Or show me your link to GitHub. Show me your link to Azure. Add your zip files to the lab, and then tell me who you're working with if you're working with anybody. This is a very simple, almost a copy and paste operation, but I want to make sure you get the syntax right. So there's going to be some syntax problems with this. If you're quick and you're careful, you can finish this off today, like in class, right? If you're not quick and you're not careful, then you're going to have errors all over the place, and you'll have to start again a couple times, right? Because it'll be a lot of little pieces that are floating around. Okay. So any questions around this one? Yes. There was not. No. What it was actually was I had a live reload script that I put inside my app.js file. And app.js, a live reload doesn't work with Heroku or Azure. It's just for testing. So what I should have done is just comment it out for live for testing with Heroku or Azure. But locally it works. If I put my live reload script in, I've just removed that whole functionality because I don't want a live reload, just to save my problem. That was the issue. And the only way I could figure that out is if I went to the Heroku logs and looked through each of the errors that I got on the Heroku logs to figure out what the problem was. There's a bit of some grueling work, right? But that was it. So you should be able to make one Mongo database on MongoLab and share it. Just put the connection string that's proper in both on the Azure side and on Heroku if you wanted to do both. I only want one cloud provider. You don't have to do both. One thing that I find that's easy with Heroku to make it easy for you to make Heroku work for you is add a proc file. Notice that I have a proc file here in your root, and I have web node server.js. This is the only thing you need to put in your proc file. And what Heroku does is it looks for this proc file. If it finds it, it'll only allocate one web dyno for you to create your application. Otherwise, it'll try and guess. And sometimes this is the issue. The other thing that's an issue with Heroku is a very complete package.json file. All right, so just FYI. So if I go to package.json, notice how I have the name of my demo of my repo. I have a repository for Git, and I also have engines. This is really important for Heroku. You have to tell it what the node and even the NPM engine is. I didn't put the NPM engine here, but you should tell it the engine is node 5.40, whatever version of node you're using. Okay? If you don't do that in your package.json file, sometimes Heroku will not like it and not put your stuff and deploy it. Okay? Any questions other than that one? Okay, go to it. I'll come around and I'll see if I can assist within about 20 minutes or so. I'll give you some time to do that.